and welcome to Connected Conversations for Creatives, a place for creatives like you to learn, grow, and connect. I'm your host, Jennifer Carr. We all know that writing can be a pretty solitary gig, right? We spend hours in our own heads trying to get words on paper. But here's the deal. You're not alone in this. There's a whole community of writers out there, each with their own quirks, styles, and stories. And guess what? We can all help each other out in ways you might not even imagined. Picture having a group of writer friends who've got your back, who can offer you feedback on your work, and who'll be there to high five you when you hit a milestone. Sounds pretty great, doesn't it? And we're not talking about followers on social media. We're talking about real connections that can push your writing to new heights. But it's not just about socializing and feeling the warm fuzzies. It's about the fundamentals and getting better at your craft. It's about mentorship and learning from others who have been through the writing trenches. It's about getting feedback that makes your writing stronger and collaborating with others who can help you step up your game. And that's not all. There are resources out there just waiting for you to discover them. From editors to cover designers to marketing wizards, there are professionals who can make your book shine and help you navigate that tricky world of publishing. With today's guest, I'm going to dig into a lot of this. We'll talk about building networks and nurturing a community that can make your journey as an author way more exciting and fulfilling. We'll explore how resources can be your secret weapons for improving your writing, finding your readers, and making your author dreams come true. What's more, we're going to talk cost-effective strategies or resources, red flags to watch out for, and how to determine which method of publishing might be best for you. Jack LaFountain is an international award-winning author and blogger who has written several horror novels, a series of Western fiction, and multiple short story collections. He's also an editor and partner in a publishing company that's devoted to giving new authors an opportunity to break into the world of writing. And my favorite part of all this is that we're both privileged to call Alabama home sweet home. So without further delay, I'd like to welcome Jack to the show. So welcome to the podcast, Jack.
Oh, thank you, Jennifer. I'm so happy to be here and glad you have me on the show. I love to talk about writing and about publishing. It's basically my whole life now.
Well,
it hasn't always been, but it
fantastic.
is now.
I love that. And so you're in the right place. But before we get into talking about writing and publishing, tell us a little bit about your background and how you ended up on the path to writing and publishing.
Well, I was listening to a panel of authors just yesterday, actually. And one said she wrote her first novel when she was 12. I thought, well, that's exciting and great. But I'm a really late bloomer to writing, so I've always kind of told stories, but generally, it's in speaking, not writing them down, which seems strange because I've written 16 books now, and I blog, every week, and of course I'm partner in a publishing company, but. I kind of really got my start deciding that I was going to write. I was taking a sophomore English class in college, which I started college late because I was in the military service first. I started college late, and this English professor asked us to write a short story essay on the most unique place we ever ate. And I wrote about a little place, and it's still there from what I gather from friends. It's the name of it is Taco Charlie's, and it's on the island of Okinawa. And I wrote the story about being there, and the grade I got was "see me." I thought that can't be good. But okay, so I went to his office. I think it was the next day, and said that I don't think you understood the assignment. This was supposed to be a real place. And I told him, I promise you, with my hand up, this is actually a real place, and I've been there. So anyway, I got an A on the assignment once he decided that I was telling the truth about that. And he wrote a note at the bottom that said your writing style sounds a lot like a fellow named Gene Shepherd. And I had no idea; I'd never heard of Gene Shepherd. But he put a note there. He wrote a book called "In God We Trust, All Others Pay Cash." So I thought, okay, I'm going to look that book up and see what it's about. But before I got the book to look it up, it was Christmas time, and I was watching The Christmas Story on TV. And when the credits rolled at the end, it said it was by a fellow named Gene Shepherd, and it came from the book "In God We Trust, All Others Pay Cash." And I thought, okay, if I sound a little bit like that, maybe it's an idea. This might be something that would really interest me. It took me about another 20 years before I actually wrote something that I wanted other people to read. And I self-published that very first book in 2005, and I did it with sort of a so-called traditional publisher in that they were sort of on the traditional model, but in it that I didn't pay for editing, cover design, all of those things. Of course, I got the cover design. I got no editing. There was no editing done to that manuscript, and it was put out, and and I sold some. Of course, they got to share the royalties from it. The next time around, which was about 7 years later before I put out the next book, it was a collection of short stories. And I thought, well, basically all I got from them was printing. I'll go find my own printer. And I did that. And I think I still have a few of those books around that I paid to have printed, for myself. I did sell some. I did. But like I said, I think I probably have 5 or 6 still around. And I don't, I don't show them off often. But I did do some writing for e-zines, which are not really around anymore too much, but I did some writing for those. And finally, I connected with a company here in Alabama. They were a small publishing company, and they bought 3 of my manuscripts or excuse me, 2 manuscripts for books. And then they put out 2 anthologies, and I wrote about half the stories in both anthologies. But I never got any traction going on the books. Not that they didn't want to publish them, they just kind of never got around to doing it, doing the work. And I came to Alabama and I did a reading for them. And one of the editors asked me, "What do you think about you and I starting a publishing company?" I said, "If it'll get my books published, that sounds like a pretty good idea. I really, I'm my company. I'm not an editor. I'm not a publisher. I write, and that's basic kind of that's all I do." Uh, but she was a good editor, and we kind of got that started. And I've got a new editor, a new partner that works with me, and since 2019, I've put out 14 books. A couple of them were the remakes from the original that were re-edited. Actually, got some editing. Got some good cover design and all of those things. So that's been great. And I got to do and I still basically am a writer. I write horror stories, I write westerns, and so then I came up with the idea I'll mix the two. So I have horror stories that take place in the Wild West, um, which is that's just kind of what I like to do. And even though I'm a partner with a publishing company, that sounds easy. You're a partner in the publishing company; they'll publish anything you want, any way you want. No, it's not. I write the story, and that's the last my hand touches it. Basically, well, I shouldn't say it's the last time, but it's like any author that submits. There are edits. It's going to be edited. All of that stuff's going to go on, and so I'm still aware of that part of the writing that I'm still trying to sell my ideas. I don't have to pitch them quite so hard because I'm a partner in the company, but the story idea has to work, and I'll get that promoted. This doesn't work,
Yeah.
And you need to rethink about doing that, and I have I've been that way. I tell people, fortunately, I do because I in our publishing company I do the initial edits on books that come in, which even though I go through and do the initial edit, I still misspell things. So, absolutely. But I've got to say that I do enjoy the small press publishing a lot more. And I wanted to kind of one thing that's unique kind of about our publishing company is we don't mind telling people you should self-publish.
Interesting.
It's we want to publish books and we like books, but it's got to be the right fit for you too. Not everybody wants the things that go along with the publishing company. So one of the things about self-publishing, one of the biggest pros for self-publishing is you have total control. Unfortunately, that's also one of the biggest cons to it. That you have, it's good to have, and I know a lot of people they get family and friends to read, but it's absolutely critical to have another set of eyes that read the book. They're going to read it critically, and they have no qualms about telling you this doesn't work. I read this paragraph; it doesn't make any sense, and go by through it that way. One of the other things that I've found, and especially lately, that is one of the drawbacks to self-publishing. But one of the good things is it can be inexpensive, uh, and I'll talk about the other side of that later. But be it inexpensive, you have to be very involved in it, and you have to make good choices. One of the best things that I found for myself as um, when I was sort of the end of self-publishing, going into the publishing company, one resource I found was podcast. People want to talk to authors, and I submitted stories, my horror stories, to podcasts that were read on the air that really, kind of got my name out there and got, people who wanted to listen to my stories. And then of course I write a blog, and a lot of the experts say, well, a blog doesn't do you any good for that, but it does get your name out there. There are people who will read it, and if you pick up one or two readers from that, that's a gain, and it basically costs you nothing. If you have a website and hook your blog to the website, yes, the website's going to cost you something. Hopefully, it's a good step above the free ones, and that's going to cost you. But that's, again, that's not a great deal. And then, of course, there's social media. The best thing to do is pick one or two platforms and go with those, and try not to spread yourself too thin. But again, just getting yourself out there. Uh, One thing our authors find too is a good way to kick off, because like I said, we handle basically new writers, new authors for the most part. They get themselves on Author Central. They become part of our publishing company's newsletter, and they reach new audiences, new people. So it can be inexpensive. The other thing is, especially the last 2 weeks ago, we were at a book fair in Summerton, Alabama, and some of the horror stories I heard from authors that were there about the amount of money they paid for cover design, for editors, to put out their book. My thought was, are you going to make any money doing that? And kind of, I've heard authors say, well, I give my books away. I'm more interested in readers than, anything. And I agree with that. But eventually, if you give all your books away, you're not going to be able to do anymore, because you're not going to have anything. But then the other thing is uh, and maybe it's a bit mercenary for some, it is that book sales are the same thing as readers. If they're gonna put down money to buy your book, you've got a reader, and you've got their attention for the course of that book, and that's your opportunity to win them. And so, I like I said, that's one sort of horror story about publishing on your own. Yes, you have total control, and if you don't farm it all out, it can be inexpensive. But then again, that's another drawback. You have total control. You also have to do it all.
Yep.
It all falls on your shoulders. And one thing I know for some writers is that makes procrastination a little too easy. When you're the owner. No, we don't have big deadlines in our publishing company. We kind of let people work at their own pace. But we do kind of remind. Well, we haven't heard from you. And what of course, we tell our authors the way ours work. I do the initial edits, and I usually have 3 or 4 manuscripts going at a time, because we work slowly with our authors. We go chapter by chapter. So, take a look at the book. We decide we want it. We sign a publishing contract, and we start in. Actually, you get a sample edit for the first chapter, but then we go chapter by chapter. These are the edits that you have. We send them to you. When you send them back to us, that's pretty much up to you. But it then falls on you. Are you in a hurry to get your book out? You get that back in a hurry. So some of the timetable is up to them. We don't really have deadlines in that. And unfortunately, there is a bit of a stigma to self-published books. Some of it's earned, and some of it's not. Uh, and it's for new readers. It's kind of buyer beware. Of course, someday if you pick a winner from a self-published, then that idea is kind of that doesn't carry so much weight. But I have had people who have self-published, and then they say to me, "My book's not selling. Why is my book not selling?" Well, I'll take a look at your book, and then I can tell them this is why your book's not selling. Okay, you need some editing or whatever. But self-publishing, like I said, my experience wasn't wasn't that great, but it wasn't that bad either. There were good points to it, and I know some writers that absolutely they don't want anything edited out of their book. And for those, if that's the initial kind of reaction we get, with like, you should self-publish. That's that's for you. I actually wrote one of our writers last week, emailed him, said, look, I cut, and I sent him the chapter, and I showed, I cut all the, like 3 paragraphs out of the start of this chapter. Are you sure you want to, or before I finish it, because it's like a 115,000 word novel, or we go much further, are you going to be okay with this kind of thing? So, oh yeah, I'm okay with it. All right, we're good, and we can go forward. But not everybody wants that, and so yeah, in that case, yeah, self-publishing is the way to go. Like I said, you have to be careful with it.
It's
On the
true.
other hand,
It's true.
yeah, it is. It's on our part, as a small publisher, like I said, some of the good things are like I said, we do walk our authors through the process. They haven't published before. A lot of them, well, a few of them, haven't researched what goes into getting a book published. What has to happen to your book, and they really don't know. They're looking around to find out, and so we walk our authors through the process each step of the way. I had one wrote me the day and said, "Am I bugging you with all the questions I asked?" I said, "Absolutely not. We like questions. If you're sending me questions about how does this work, how does this work, you're interested in your book, and you're going to promote your book when it comes out. You're going to be involved in it, and that's what we want. Absolutely. So you have, in our case, you have some control as as an author, but you have people working with you, help you with the things that you haven't done before, you haven't tried before. Of course, one of the things with our at least with House of Honor Books and our small publishing thing, and this catches people by surprise. There's no cost to you. We don't. The people say, how do I make money? How do you make money? Why do you do this? Well, this is the way it works. We provide these services for you, and then we sell your book. When your book sells, you get a percentage of that money, and we get a percentage of that money. So we are invested in your book and in selling your book, and that's how we make our money. Make our money. Uh, and one of the things too about even a small publisher, it's a bit of validation for the author. We have authors that have self-published and then brought us their books and said, well, I self-published, but it's not really doing anything, and I'm not sure about it. And I just like, they're really, what they're looking for is for a publishing company to say, yeah, okay, this is a valid, you did a good job. And for the most part, the ones we've had are that way. And because ours is so small, we get to know our authors, they get to know us. And one fellow told me yesterday, we were at a book signing together. He said, and he was talking to somebody that walked up, that if I have a question over, I can call Jack. Of course, he lives here in Huntsville with us, and he's like, we'll go out to coffee together. We'll talk about what my book needs, or what's the next step. So there is that. Of course, on the other side, there you are surrendering control. And what a lot of people don't realize is your name goes on the copyright. When we put out a book, it's copyrighted by the author's name, not our publishing company. But in essence, what you've done is you have sold the rights to your book. So the publishing company, in effect, owns your book. And if and we've had them read, people read the contract close enough. That's like, when it comes to the cover, the publishing company has the final say so. And ours plainly says, you get input into what you want for the cover, but the publishing company has the final say so. Same thing goes really for the manuscript as well. But then again, you've got an editor sort of reading over your shoulder, scrutinizing everything you've said and picking at it here and there, and you have to share the profits, which you self-publish, all the money goes to you. When you use a publishing company, the publishing company gets a percentage of that. And one thing that a lot of authors really have difficulty with, at least those that we've worked with, is that while we're handling a lot of the business end of it, our author, as the author, you still have to market your book. And I was kind of happy yesterday at the writers' conference we went to. One of the women on the panel, who is traditionally published, she has an agent, a fairly big name publisher, and she told the prospective writers that were there, you still have to go out and market your book. They have a marketing team, but you know what? You still have to go out and do it. And of course, a smaller publisher like us, our advertising budget is not that great, and that's we've got a few authors think, okay, I wrote the book, I'm done. It's like, no, it's just starting. Now you have to, it's sort of like a baby. You've given birth to it, and you know what? Now you've got to take care of it for the rest of its life. And if it's, if you're going to get out there and sell, you've got to get out and do that. And one thing we of course we encourage our authors to do is go out and do personal appearances, book signings. One of our authors found out a week ago. He went and was actually at a book signing. When we go, yeah, I take my books, of course. Well, we take all the books from the publishing company. I have a table, and we have other tables for the other authors. And we happened to have one close enough to where he lived that he came to the book signing and the book fair, and it there in our booth. And he found out, even though he was there and he was promoting all the books that we had there, and he did a very good job of promoting all the books that we had there available. But he noticed his book was the one that sold more than anybody else's that were on the table, that table. In fact, he sold just about his book is pretty new, and he sold that day just about as many copies of his book as he'd already had been sold on Amazon and all the promotion up to then. So, yeah, people they just like to meet you and talk with you about your book, and that sells things. And that part of it, that marketing part of it, is critical. And I know authors tend to be, at least a lot of them that I've met, are very introverted. They don't like. In fact, I had a lady tell me yesterday talking about publishing her books. That I'm afraid to get out there. No, I don't. You know, everybody is. I'm strangely enough, and I talk about publishing and writing all the time, but I'm a pretty private person. I said, what you're going to do when your book, if you get your book published and you're out selling it, you're going to do what we're doing right here. We're just talking about writing and what we like, books we like. That's all. That's what you're going to do, and you're doing it right here with me. You don't know me, and never met me before, and so you're doing it. You can do it, and that's going to be a key to your success. And like I said, it's a new idea for some people, but then some take very readily to it. We have one new author. His book came out 2 weeks ago, and he's already made 3 personal appearances. He's been at he went to a book fair in Central Alabama. He was last Friday night. He was in Huntsville doing book. He was with me yesterday. We set up a booth yesterday at the Madison Library here, and his book is doing well. And that's the kind of thing that has to go into it. Yes, all the writing is important, but once you get it written, some of the biggest work starts to take place, because you have to sell it. That's Yes, you wrote it for the readers, but like I said, readers have to buy it. So you have to get it out there, let them know that it's there. Well, especially today with self-publishing being so easy, there are so many millions of books. We turn most of our books into audiobooks, and we'll put it out for auditions. Say in the morning, we'll put it out one morning for auditions, and as soon as we put it out, on the list of books for auditions, we're on page 1. That afternoon, we might be on page 3 or 4. There's that many books coming at you, so you've got to get out and tell people about your book, and that's hard for new authors. And like I said, for some, to even the idea of doing it is frightening, and not only frightening, but it's like, why do I have to do that? That's what I have a publisher for. Well, I'm telling even the big list publishers, you still have to. They still want you to go do that. That's still something that's your job to do. But it seems to be working well for it, anyways.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so, do you have like a list of events and stuff, or do your authors come up with their own their own events that they do, or how do you connect authors with those events?
We do try to let them know about events in their area, and ask them to be inventive, because that's worked for us. One thing that I've done, I have a book of Bigfoot stories. So we have a place in town that is called Bigfoot's Little Donuts. So there's a place to have a book signing, Uh,
Yeah. Oh,
uh,
yeah.
we have a Louisiana restaurant and a Louisiana coffee shop here in town, and most of my books take place on the bayou down in Louisiana. So there you go. We have an author who he is a diver, scuba diver, and there's a dive shop in his town, and his story is about diving. So go down to the dive shop and see if they'll let you have a little corner to sit up there and and sell books. It works. It doesn't have to be book fairs or big conferences. We tell them, a lot of those they're expensive. Some of them can be. It can be very expensive, and especially new authors. You have one book, and you're some of the tables are $300-400 for a table at a show. That's not the kind of thing you want to do. We tell them check your local area. Look for events. Look for craft sales. A lot of places that if it's a craft sale or they call it handmade, they'll take you in that you're a local author and you made this book. A lot of places like that. Little holiday markets. What we're doing right now. We're good. We're scheduled for two events that are holiday markets and another one that falls in the same time period that we're kind of calling. We're the main sponsors, so we're calling it a holiday market. Uh, and although we tell them these things are coming up right now, people are going out and they're looking for gifts to buy. A signed copy of a book, it can be a gift that somebody wants to give. Go out and get on these events. Most of them, the feed is set up is minimal, and and it's worth the returns that it will make for you. So,
Yeah.
we kind of keep our, that kind of thing on the inexpensive side, but it is effective.
Oh yeah, and people love to be able to say, "Oh, and I met the author." And I'm like,
Right.
how good
Yeah.
does that make you feel as an author? It kind of validates what you're doing and what you've spent all of your time and your sweat and your tears on for the last however long it's taken. So
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
no, those are great events to go to. I chose self-publishing for a number of reasons. Like the time frame that it was going to take to get an agent. I tried the querying thing. That was not my deal. There were way too many rejections. And then even then they said it could take a year or 2 years before they even published the book. And I was like, I don't really want to, wait that long because what I have to offer, I think was worth putting out sooner than later. And so there were a lot of reasons, and the control, obviously the final say and stuff. That's just my personality. Like to thine own self be true, right? Like I knew that I needed that control of the process. But I would say that for some people, going with a small press publisher, I mean, that could be very ideal because especially new authors who have no idea what they're getting into. But if they don't know what they're getting into, what are some red flags like new authors should be aware of when it comes to sending in their manuscripts to different publishers and that kind of thing?
One thing we do, I tell most everybody that we meet, it's an old saying. I'm an old guy, so I have lots of old sayings. But the old saying is that money flows to the author. If you're paying somebody to publish it, don't pay somebody to publish your book. If it comes down to that, self-publish. Like I said, if you feel you want this book out, you want it out, pretty quickly, and the only way that you get advertisers, you're going to pay us, or you have to buy a certain number of copies if we put it out. So don't do that. If you self-publish, if you're gonna, don't do that. That's really not the way to go. Um, and of course, like I said, we're pretty personal, so. And we tell our author, we have one author to put in. He already had ideas for the movie scripts for, like, do you want to talk? We were talking contracts. Look, we don't do that. If you can get somebody to buy your book and make a film of it, that's all on you. That's yours. We don't buy those rights. That's yours. We just want to publish your book.
That's fair. And not every book should be a movie, just saying,
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
There's some that there's a reason that I really got lost in reading it, but I could not imagine it up on a big screen somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a whole different ballgame. And it's flattering to think I did have a screenwriter approach me and want to turn my first book into, he was like, we could write a script on this and I think it would make a fantastic television series. And I was like, yeah, but here's the thing. I don't want to pay you to write that script and I can't write a script. That's not my thing. So if we could come to an agreement there, that's a different story. But he didn't want to budge on that. And I was like, well, it's okay. But I think paying up front is one of those things that should give you pause. It's like, what am I paying you to do exactly? And so that's true whether it's a screenwriter or whether it's a publishing company or, even your book cover designer. Like, be sure that you know what you're getting into and read your every contract and maybe have a lawyer on hand when it comes to every contract.
Yes, you definitely, and we've been very lucky about that. Our authors that we got, they go over their contract, and we make sure they understand what it is. And we've had a few. We had one fellow that we were going to publish a book of poetry for him, and he wanted to make the title the same title as one of the poems in the book. And it finally came down as like, no, we don't want to do that. It makes the title of the book too ambiguous. You want people to know, kind of yes, it's poetry, what kind of poetry it's going to be. We think the title of the book ought to be the title of this other poem. And we hadn't got any feedback, even though we'd asked about cover design. So we designed a cover, which he said, now my friend's mad at me because he was designing a cover and I didn't get it. And we said, look, we'll let you out of your contract and we tell our, if you're unhappy with it, we'll let you out of the contract and you can self-publish or you can take it, wherever you want to go. We want our authors to be happy with what deal that they're making on. And if they're not happy, we'd rather let them go than have them be unhappy.
Oh yeah, and that's better for everybody involved in that situation. And I don't think you're going to find that with a larger traditional publisher. So, that's a pretty good deal if somebody wanted to, really look into a small press publishing situation. So let's kind of shift gears a little bit and talk about the importance of building a community for writers and how can we do that? Because I'll be honest, I have always been a Lone Ranger worker when it comes to my writing and publishing and marketing and that kind of thing. And it has just been in the last year that I have really found the value in building a community of people who have similar goals and similar interests. But in the beginning, you feel like everybody's out to compete with you. When that's not the case. How do we go about building a community, and how important in your mind is building a community for yourself as an author?
I think it's very important. We try to do that with our publishing company. We have a private Facebook group that's only for our authors to talk among themselves, to encourage each other. We allow, of course, allow all of our authors to guest blog. We have a blog on our publishing company website. We open that up to them, especially to go on and talk about why they started writing, what problems they have with writing. How do you handle writer's block? How do you do this? How do you do that? And talk about that. We have a couple of great articles that our authors have written about their first experience going out to do a book signing and what was it like, and what did they learn from it, and we get that. And I've been to several writers groups myself. In fact, I had led a writers group when I lived in Washington State. We didn't do we didn't do a lot of the critique and things that you get in some. It was more an idea of just a time of fellowship and talking together and encouraging each other. And it went very well. Like I said, we didn't do a lot of critique. We did have one fellow had great ideas for stories and great characters. He already had all these characters thought up, and the whole thing is like, listen, brother, you actually have to write that down on the page. It's good stuff, but you have to write it down, and just things like that. I've been to some groups, and I was part of a group at a library just outside of Boise, Idaho, too, for a while, and we did critique once a month. You had to submit a month or two in advance so people could read it, and it was nice. I'm not wild about critique groups for the reason that if it's somebody, because most of the time the way they work is everybody has to critique, and it's unless you're writing in that genre, your critique might, if you're talking about grammar or punctuation or something like that, okay. But if you're talking about the way that it should go, not always, I don't think they always hit it. I was at a group here not long ago, a writers group, and one of the writers in the group, it was her turn to read a story, and she submitted her first chapter and read the story, and I thought it was great. And it kind of went around the room, people critiquing, and sort of one of the overarching complaints you didn't explain this enough, you didn't explain that enough, and I ended up somehow being the last one to speak, and I said, "I'm sorry to disagree with everybody, but I hate when authors over-explain things to me. I'd rather they intrigue me with a little bit and make me think, what's that about? I've got to read the next chapter to find out how does that work. Um, you know, and in that way, I mean, some of the things were good, but again, sometimes you get out of the genre, and it's you don't get exactly all the help that you need, and it confuses some people. That would and a lot of us are very insecure about it anyways, and it's like, oh well, am I doing that wrong? Could I be doing it this way, or another way? I've been part of some of the I do NaNoWriMo
Mhm.
every November, or well, the last three. I'm 3 for 5, so but I had a long gap between the two that I didn't finish and the three that I do now. I have a series of books, and I write one of the books for that series every November during NaNoWriMo. And I've been to some very good groups with that sort of. Most of them are pre-COVID times, because we were actually getting together. A lot of people still don't want to get together, but uh, another good group that I was part of when I was living in Idaho was one. And if I understand this right, they have a national sort of chapters in each city, and it's called Shut Up and Write. And that's what the meeting is about. We got together. I think the one I went to, we got together at Panera Bread, and we said hello. We got our cup of coffee and whatever, and we talked for maybe 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and then the whole thing was, all right, no more talking. Everybody writes for an hour, and it's a good sort of prodding to get you going. Um, and different groups at the library I found that also work good. But yeah, it's a great benefit to get out and talk to other people who are doing the same thing or trying to do the same thing. And the idea that I've got that I shared with my writers about finding unique places to do book signing. I got in an authors group. Lady was talking about she wrote a murder mystery, and the murder happened in a brewery. So she went to her local brewery, small craft brewery, and said, "Hey, my murder mystery takes place in a brewery. Can I use your brewery for a book signing?" And they were thrilled. Like, yeah, we definitely want you, to
Yeah.
come here and do that. And hey, yeah, that's a great idea. But yeah, they're there. So they're great ideas. We get. Again, that's one of the drawbacks of having to carry all the weight is you don't always get all the new ideas. I'm not one to jump on new trends right away, but I'm open to good ideas. Whenever I hear an idea, I say that will work. I will jump in and try it until it doesn't
Yeah.
work. you know, but usually I guess I've been lucky that usually when I jump into something like that, I find yeah, they were right. It works, and it'll work. It works for me too.
Yeah, no,
Because
that's fantastic. And I think those communities that you plug into, find the people that you have the similar goals, something you have in common. And because, yeah, I have found that when you present your work to someone who does not typically read the genre that you write, you do end up with some feedback that might hurt your feelings or it's not helpful or productive. But also just the connections that you do make with people, the resources that you come in contact with. It was through the podcast that, I found my most recent cover designer. It was through my podcast that I found my entertainment lawyer. It's been through these connections that I have reached out and made with people that I have found people to have in my tribe and in my community, and the inspiration that they bring in and of themselves. And I have people that I can say, hey, do you need this kind of person? Because I have access to this kind of person.
well, yeah, one thing that I picked up, probably the very first chapter of a book that I had critiqued, uh, I kind of learned a lesson, but then not really. I still do my own thing, but it was an opening chapter to it's a murder. It's a werewolf story. The murderer happens to be a werewolf, or actually a rougarou, they call it in Louisiana. And but the story opens with, and this is something that really actually happened to me. I was doing travel nursing. I lived in an RV. I was places like 13 weeks at a time, and then I moved. But I had a little dog, and one morning she just went absolutely crazy, barking at the front door. Um, she was a barker anyways, but she was really after it that morning. It was like out of the ordinary. And I finally got her calmed down, and we went out for a walk later. But um, I got to thinking, well, what if there really was something on the other side of the door? And I opened the door, and that's where the whole basically the start of the book came from. And so I brought that out. It was critiqued that chapter, and the question everybody asks is, "At the dog?" Because I didn't tell what happened to the dog. I did later in the story, but it was like that. So I tend to be a little bit more careful about killing off animals in my story. That's not enough that I don't do it occasionally. I've done it a few times since then, but usually when I do, I will get comments. Oh, it's so sad that the horse got shot. Well, yeah, that it is. That was kind of put in there for that reason.
And and sometimes you have to have that to motivate your character to do the next thing. And I remember when, I wrote my first book, and there's a character who he does not survive the entire book. And you want to talk about some pushback? I got so many angry messages. My dad was one of them, who was like, "I'm sorry, but I can't finish reading this book right now because," and I was like, "I'm not sorry, but I'm sorry. Please forgive me." Like.
Yeah, I've had that happen. I did a reading at a coffee shop one time, and the story I have is it takes place in Vietnam during the Tet Offensive, and it's about nurses, which I got these stories from nurses, and I put it together into this short story, and I got up and read that, and this one fellow came from the back. He said, "That really took me back," and I thought, "Oh, that's not." He said, "No, but no." He saw the look of concern on his. "No, no, but I liked it. I liked it." Like, okay, well, that's good.
You're about to flip a switch there.
Yeah, I'm like, oh. This, I didn't mean to, set somebody off and, trigger somebody into something bad. That wasn't what I was trying. I was trying to, make them sound heroic. Yeah, that happened. One of the things that has amazed me, and just I still don't know necessarily how to think about it. I started out writing a series of books. I call them the Ed Landry books, because that's my character. But everybody has decided they're the Moon books because they all have Moon in the title. There's a Bayou Moon and Blood Moon, Voodoo Moon. And to me, Ed is sort of a real person. We hold conversations. He tells me what happens next in the story. So he seems pretty real to me. And even my editor, when I'm around, and like, I've heard her tell people, "Well, Jack's off in New Orleans." "When did he leave?" I said, "No, he's in the other room, but he's in New Orleans. So we don't bother him. He's there." But I did 3 of the books in the series. I started getting multiple emails from people, and it showed up in reviews. And people saying, "We are really concerned about Ed because he never seems to get the girl." I was like, "Really? He's not real." Right? Well, he's real to me. I thought he's real to me, but I didn't know he's real to anybody else. They would be worried about what was going on with his life. But so I did help him out. The next book I did in the series was called Lover's Moon. I told him, but Ed's not good with math. He doesn't know, love's supposed to be, just sort of a circle. He's got a triangle. So he's got 2 girls that are in love with him and fighting over him. And of course, one happens to be a vampire, and the other one's a werewolf. But I said, here you go. It's about girls.
Careful what you ask for, because the author will make it happen. It just may not be the way you want it to.
Yeah, I had a one fellow. I did when I was in nursing. I did training for some of the Navy corpsmen, and one of the guys, I became friends with him, and he asked me one day, he said, "Would you put me in a book? Use my name for a character?" And I said, "Well, yeah, sure. You've got a good name for a character. I'll put you in there." And his next thought, he thought about it a minute. And they said, "But wait, don't kill me off." So I told him, "Well, look, you've read 1 or 2 of my stories. It's, just because you die doesn't mean you're not in the story anymore."
Right. Yeah, my best friend the other day, we were talking about my next book that's coming out in February, and she goes, "Hey, would you ever use me in a book? I want to be a character in a book." And I was like, "You don't want that to happen, because I'm not in control of what these characters do. You think I am, but I'm not. They tell me what's going to happen next. So if my new character with your name comes up and she tells me that she's about to do something crazy, it's not personal."
Yeah, and they do. I'm a very, very much a pantser. Like I said, that one story, that was all I had for the book was a dog barking at the door, and it became a book. But my characters do talk with me and tell me when I don't have it right. One of them that I started, I think it was Voodoo Moon. I was about 4 chapters into that, and Ed told me, he's like, I'm the star of this series, and I don't have enough time in this book yet. Like, yeah, I think you're right. I think I rewrote the start of that book like 4 times to get it the way the characters wanted it, and it finally
Seriously.
worked out. Yeah,
Yes, if you had this conversation with anybody who wasn't an author, they might think you need to speak to someone professionally. But the
yeah,
fact of the matter is, my stories are very character driven. Like I love the plot as well, but they're very character driven. And so like I'll hear a song and it inspires a character who then gets a story. And like that's
right.
how my process kind of works. And so yeah, no, it makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah, yeah. I had a character like that. I started writing the story, and I wanted to introduce this character that was going to be a very close friend of the female protagonist in the story, and I was debating over just actually how I was going to bring her in and have it work. And I heard there's an old '60s song called "She's Not There," and that came on the radio, and I said, "That's it. Yes, she's her close friend and everything, but she's a ghost. She's not there." And that worked into the story. Um, One of the things I've kind of lined up some practical advice for writers too here to talk about. But
Yeah.
one of my things on that is listen to the voices. The old Facebook men. They really do have good ideas, and that yeah, listen to that. I think it was S. Scott Fitzgerald said, "Writers are not real people. They're a bunch of people trying really hard to be one person." Yeah, I think that's it.
That's accurate. That is so accurate. Oh, that's funny. And it's so true. Like you have to give into that intuition, right? I think creatives in general, we have a very high intuition and sometimes we question it and it's like, no, that is where your stories come from. They come from inside of you and you have to trust that gut feeling and say, and you know what? If your character changes their mind later down the road, that's fine. But let's get started on this. I was literally having this conversation last night. I'm working on a second book in a series that for the book that I just finished, and I was like, okay, I've already started on book 3 as well, and so I was going, okay, these two books because they have similar characters, they come from the same place, and they're just moseying the story forward. And I was asking my husband, I said, so is this too similar to this? Because this character told me that this is where we're going to go, and he just kind of stopped for a minute, and I was like, well, you know what I mean? Like I felt very strongly inside of me that this is where the story needed to go. Is it too similar to what's happening in book 3 with a totally different character? And he just couldn't get past the fact, my characters are talking to me. But I'm like, this is my process. Welcome to behind the curtains.
Yeah, yeah, I get that. If I didn't sleep very well last night. My editor was saying, "Was Ed talking to you?" Good, because we got to get this book. He needs to talk to you.
Well, and that does happen too. At 2 a.m., it's like, hey, I would really like to have a conversation with you. And I'm like, you're not real. Please go back to bed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's funny. Okay, so what other kind of writing tips do you have for writers or writing advice that you have for writers?
One, and I've heard people say this doesn't work, but I believe in it, is that they'll saying that writers write. I long ago I took a correspondence course in writing, creative writing, when it really was correspondence, when you had to send a letter and papers and handwritten things on paper back and forth. It was long, I did that. I've had college English classes that everybody has to have, um, but I've never studied creative writing or gone to a lot of classes about it. I've shared conversations with people about it and that, but basically I tell people you just need to write, even if it's no good. You'll learn as you write what sounds good and what doesn't sound good. What makes sense or how to describe something, how not to describe something. I got a little blowback not long ago because I used one of Stephen King's quote when I told a couple of my authors that the road to hell is paved with adverbs, and every one of your dialogue tags does not need to have an adverb in it. Okay, think of a different word. You know, I'm not a big fan of just picking something out of this thesaurus and know what it means and how it's supposed to be used. You have to do that first, but you can find a more descriptive word. I know you can. I know you can do it. And a lot of that only comes from writing.
Yep.
You have to sit down and write like that. Even, and I go again, the old saying, you can edit a bad page. You can't edit a blank page.
Oh, true.
So sit down and write. You will learn to write as you go. And I don't know how successful I am, but I know that now I'm a better writer than when I started, simply because I've written. And, I've had, I think so, but I've had other people that go back and read and said, you sound much better now. And it's from doing, but of course, I'm big by learning by doing. And I think that works for authors better than anything. Not that going to class or studying or whatever is not good. I have no objection to that. But like used to tell a fellow, you actually have to sit down and write it down. It comes down to that, and it's important to do that. I think it was Peter Benchley said one time that he didn't know he doesn't know anything about writing, still doesn't know anything about writing. He said, but by the time I discovered that, I was too famous to quit. Well, there you go. You don't know what you're doing, sit down and do it anyways. Who knows? Maybe one day you'll be too famous to quit.
We can all hope.
Yeah, I got the first part of that down. I don't know anything about writing. I don't have to. I'm still waiting for the second part to happen. That hasn't come about yet. But another thing I tell people is write your own story. Forget about what might be trendy. The books that I have that sell the best are the ones with the Rougarou, the Cajun werewolf in it. And all I heard before I started writing was werewolves are out. Werewolves, vampires, all the old universal monsters that I grew up with, those are all passe. They're all out. Forget about that. We don't write about those things anymore. I do. I still like them. So, and I found that evidently a lot of other people like them. So, write your own story, whatever you like. And again, that's it. Write what you like. I know there is a saying, write what you know, and that's valid. That's valid as far as it goes. But the point is, you need to know more. If you want to tell a story about something and you don't know anything about that, we'll go find out about it, and then you write about it, because that's what you want to write about. My Rougarous, I didn't really. I'd heard the word, but I really didn't know. And now I can tell you the difference between a Rougarou and a werewolf, according to legend and lore and their history and things. I can tell you all that stuff now, but I didn't know. Um, one thing I did, I wrote a book about Bigfoot, and for the most part in this book, it's 4 short stories. 3 of the short stories are things people have told me. This happened to me, and I incorporated that into a story. The fourth story in it, I thought I'm going to do something different, something I haven't seen anybody do, but I want to do. I'm going to write a story from Bigfoot's point of view. He's got to get his family through the hardest winter ever. And I asked people in the the Bigfoot community, tell me, how do you know? Because they talk about Bigfoot things, the reasons. So tell me how you know. And I went through a whole lot of people before I actually hit on something that, okay, that's if that happened, that sounds like there's thinking going on here. I said, okay, so I've got this cryptid character, and he thinks, which is good because he's going to tell the story. And then I thought, okay, I've got it made. I can sit down and write the story. And just as I sat down to write the story, I thought about, but what? He doesn't speak English. What am I going to do? What does Bigfoot call a person? What does he call a cow? What does he call this? What does he call that? And I thought, I told people later, said, I'm not like Tolkien. I'm not going to write a whole dictionary for these characters. I'm not that ambitious, and I don't know that I'll ever do another book on it. So we're just going to come up with my ideas on this, and it seemed to go over. People like the story, so and one of the things I've kind of in connection with that same story that I tell people is tell the truth. I was talking with a class not long ago that what makes a good liar? Because that's fiction writers, we're liars. Mm-hmm. We're going to lie to you. We tell you right off the bat, just simply that it's fiction. This is a lie. But what makes a person a good liar? And people thought about it, nobody came out. I said, well, what makes a person a really good liar is they put so much truth into what they're telling you that when the little bit of lie is slipped in there, you don't notice. And that's what a good writer does. Give a lot of truth. If you're going to talk about, for mine, Louisiana, I'm going to talk about Louisiana. And I've had writers say, there were various trees, and no, you don't say various trees. Tell me what kind of trees are there. Convince me that you've been there and you know what, and I got that a few times. Like, did you grow up in Louisiana? It's like, I've driven across the state once. And that was it. I'm planning to go this next year, but anyway, put so much truth in there, and not just research, but kind of if you can talk to people from there, where your story's going to take place, or talk to people about if you're going to write about a sheriff, talk to somebody in law enforcement, not only about their job, but kind of how they think about things, their life outside of it, uh, but tell a lot of truth. And your story that your lie that you're slipping in there will seem very real, and that's what you want. You want people to think this is really happening, and that's the best thing that you can do. Um, and one thing I like I said, especially took away from the author thing yesterday was that you create worlds, especially the sci-fi writers. You create these whole worlds. Uh, you can make time, and that's what you've got to do. You've got to make. People say I don't have time. Make time. You know, when I started writing, I was a nurse. I had 4 kids and family, and I got up at 3 o'clock in the morning and wrote. And then maybe 4 or 5, I'd fall back to sleep for a little bit and then up again. If you want to do it, make the time to do it. Don't put it off. Uh, and then tell them too. Sometimes write like a rabid dog. If anybody comes in the room, you just snap at them. Yeah, they're afraid. Oh, okay, they're gonna they get rabies or whatever. They're gonna go away and leave you alone and let you write. Uh, Sometimes that's effective. Sometimes that can go badly. So you have to kind of use some judgment on it. You don't want
Know
to
your audience. Yeah, know your audience.
I know your audience. And then the other thing is to read.
Mm.
I had an author tell me, I don't read because I don't want to ruin my originality. Right. I'll tell you something. Solomon said there's nothing new under the sun. And basically, in writing, there are only 2 fiction stories. Somebody's going on a trip, or somebody new came to town. You can pretty much boil anything down to that. Uh, that's all there is. So you do your own, and that's original enough. That's all the originality you need to worry about. Um, just make sure you do it your way. Do it the way you want it to be told.
Yes.
That's originality.
I agree. I can't imagine being an author and not reading. I can't. Like that boggles my mind to think about that. Simply because that's, it's just a love of words usually. Like writing and reading go hand in hand. I don't know. I just cannot imagine.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I had an experience, and I read later. Maybe it was from Stephen King's On Writing, but he when he was young, he wrote a story in the style of somebody he was reading at the time, and he showed it to his mother, and she said, "You can do better than that." And yeah, I had an experience. I did that when I don't know, I was 12 or 13, I guess. And my mom was reading this series of books, and I love the character. I read them after she did, but uh, I wrote a story that was kind of along the lines of the character. I mean, you could recognize the character for the same ones, and and my dad said, "Don't you don't need to copy what somebody else has done. You can do it yourself, and do it well." And
Absolutely. I mean, it's one thing to get inspiration or to be like, oh, no, that would make an interesting story because it's inspired you to write your own story, but definitely
right.
like be yourself. Don't try because somebody else has already written that book. It's time for you to write your book and you've got your story for a reason. Like, so that means there's somebody out there ready to receive it. You just have to be willing to put your story to the page.
Yes, yes, very much so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, I was going to say, yeah. A lot of people are I found are nervous about doing that. Nobody's going to like it, but you know, write write it till you like it. Well, I say that, but then again, I write stuff and I don't.
Yeah.
I told somebody one time I wrote the second in the Moon book, and I was disappointed. And I happened to tell somebody later it'd been out a while, and I was like, I think they were asking about things that disappointed me as an author. And I did that second book, and basically it's you know, and his reply was, "What are you talking about? That's the book that got all the good reviews." Like, well, I don't know. It just seemed to let down to me.
We are our biggest critic. Like we
Yeah.
are our own biggest critic. I know I am. And so like I was, so my next book that comes out in February, it's called Fall When You're Ready. Anyway, I'd sent it to my editor and I said, okay, just tell me one more time that this is not the most boring book you've read. like I had done all of my updates and stuff. And I said, because I am bored to death reading it. And of course, I've read it 14 times, right? Like I've read that book so many times that I know before I read the next word, what's going to happen. And she's like, I promise it's a great book. You're just tired of reading it. I said, I know I am, but I just needed you to tell me that it wasn't the worst book ever.
Oh yeah, I had one like that. I gave it to the editor and said, I do not want to ever see this book again. Here, take it. Do whatever you want to with it. I don't care about it.
Gosh, yes. My first book, I read it so many times and I loved it and I was emotionally attached to it, but I think it was because it was my first, right? Like it was my first baby that I had put out there. The second one, we fought a little bit, kind of like your second child, you have a little bit more strong will there. But this third one, I'm like, I'm so over it. Next.
Yeah, the other one, I saw somebody one of my Facebook friends posted a little thing on Facebook today, and it was a takeoff on the Pirates of the Caribbean movie, and the characters were pictured, and the one said, "You've got to be the worst author I've ever heard of." And I was, yes, but you've heard of me.
Yeah, what a great mentality. See, that's the perfect mindset. It's like, you know what? You have heard of me.
Yes.
You might not have liked my book, but you know who I am. I love it.
Oh, yeah. The end of September, I was in Arkansas doing signing, and this guy waving his friends, come over. Okay, I was just watching from back. He pointed at my book. He said, Jack LaFountain said, I know. These are good books. You need to read the book. And he was asking then about, because we had the whole publishing company books out there, and I thought, pointed out a few other books over here, and I said, yeah, and I wrote these over here. He said, wait, you're him? He picked up the book and looked on the back and said, you are him. Yeah, most of the time.
When you're not busy being Ed.
Yeah.
Right. That's so funny. Goals. Those are my goals. One day that will happen. And until then, I enjoy connecting with people through the podcast. And I had one girl, I was talking to her, one woman, excuse me. We're like buddies, but she was on the podcast. She goes, I just love every episode you've ever done. And I'm like, oh. Like, I've made it. It's so thoughtful. Anyway.
Well, like I said, I have to thank podcast, because that's where he heard the name and picked up the book. Yeah. Fella read, well, I actually had one fella read a whole book. I sent him a chapter. Would you read a chapter of, this book on your podcast? And I sent it to him. He said, I'll read the whole book. If you want to say, that was when I was self-publishing and very first started. I said, oh, absolutely, read it. And, that's where that came. That's where, he picked up the name there. But
that's awesome. Oh, that's fantastic. All right. So I'm going to sit back and I'm going to let you be in charge of the show. You get to decide all the things. Like, you literally answered every question that I had on my list without me ever having to ask a single one, which I was just like sitting here going, next. So you're like the perfect guest. That was amazing. So now you're in charge of the show.
Well, that's awesome. You want to talk about books or writing or publishing? You have to shut me up. I'll just keep talking about them. How do you work with getting your books and your name out there? What are some things that you do?
So my first stop was Facebook. Honestly, if I'm being honest, like Facebook was my first go-to. I was just like, hey, everybody, I'm writing a book. And so, of course, you've got your mom and your mom's friends and your dad and your dad's friends and all these people, they're like, oh, I'm so proud of you. And of course, they're the first ones in line to buy it. But then from there, I started a little Facebook group for readers. I was like, hey, if you like my books, we'll share ideas about other people who write the similar books and just kind of build a community there. I think TikTok has really been my best platform, which is wild, but that's where I've connected with more authors because other authors are doing the same thing I'm trying to do. And so we've kind of collaborated in a lot of spaces. I've got a Discord group started, like just the online chat area that where other authors can come in. We're prepping for NaNoWriMo and stuff like that. And just offering up encouragement and accountability. That was one thing that I didn't really think I would appreciate, was forming an accountability partnership and saying, hey, will you ask me halfway through the week if I've sat down and written anything, just back and forth and giving that accountability. And so that has really been beneficial. because once I'm motivated to write, then I'm also motivated to share what I've written. And so that's social media has been my biggest thing. I've attempted to start a newsletter. I send it out once a month because I know nobody reads newsletters anymore, but I do it anyway just in case. Like my dad clicks on it every time, whether he reads it or not, I don't know, but I'm thankful. So those are the big things. But it's really been word of mouth, and then the podcast, obviously, like having this opportunity to be like, hey, not only have I written books, but I have resources, and so people put my name together with those different things, and so. Yeah, that's really been my biggest thing. I want to do in-person events. It's really hard to find because my first two books are Christian romantic suspense. And so that's a very specific genre. It's a very niche genre. And so it's not a lot of places. You can't go to the brewery and try to sell that book.
Right.
It's a little bit different.
Yes, sure. Yeah, I found that true with mine. I have a Christian Western series. And it's a whole different world to try and market it than a lot of the other ones.
It is, but what I have found specifically for those two books, Facebook groups for Christian readers, avid readers of Christian fiction, like all of these groups. I just went through Facebook and searched Christian book readers or something like that. And I mean, I joined probably 45, 50 groups, and then I follow their rules. Obviously, some of them are like you can only post your stuff on the weekends, or some are very lenient. You can post them whenever. People ask, "Hey, I'm looking for a book about this. I like romantic suspense," and I'm commenting and interacting with people, and those have been my biggest selling points for those things. I had one lady; she didn't message me specifically, but she posted, "I'm looking for a good book for a small mom's book club," and I was like, "Ooh, let me tell you what book I've written, and here are some topics from that book that you could talk about in your book club," and stuff like that. So those have been my biggest arenas where I have had the most success, I think, so far.
Yep, that's something we encourage our authors to do, is to join the Facebook groups like that are supportive and that share titles, hey, I launched a book today, those kind of things. And I do that. I tend to do that too, especially with the like I said, the Christian Western series that I've had, because got that day, I think it was, I'm looking for a good Christian book for my dad. You get, get those opportunities, and you just say, well, here's something I wrote. And yeah, it's a good way to get.
I have found, and I don't know why this is, but it's really hard to market a Christian fiction book. Like, I guess maybe because it's a small market, or, the traditional Christian publishing houses have such a large hold on the market. They've got the big names out there, and they do advertise for their people and that kind of thing. I realize they have to market their own stuff as well, but you're looking Karen Kingsbury and Lynn Eastwood. What's her name? Oh my gosh, it just left me. And anyway, but they have such a huge grab on things, and so it's really hard to weasel your way in as a self-published Christian author.
Yeah, I've found that probably the toughest area that I have. In fact, I've written one. My only nonfiction book was a book on Christianity devotional, and getting that out there. And I've found too, I think, and I don't know if this is maybe just my local area, but I find a lot of the Christian readers are hesitant about it unless they have a recommendation. Like, you're talking, somebody recommends it to them, that kind of goes away, and then they're more apt to buy book.
Yes, or you've got one person who wants it in their church library. Well, do you know how many sales you just cost me by putting my book? I'm flattered, but you've cost me a lot of sales by putting it in your church library.
Yeah. So what kind of writers groups do you belong to? Some writers groups off of Facebook, where you attend meetings? Or
so I'm I'm a member of the American Christian Fiction Writers Association, or Association of Christian Fiction Writers is what it is. So I'm a member of that, and there's an online presence, but there's not one in the Southeast. Like, there's not one for Alabama, and so I'm not specifically in that group. I got invited to join one in Florida because we're Southeast, but it was like South Florida or Central Florida, and I'm like, that I'm not traveling for that.
Yeah.
I had a couple people in that group. They were like, "Hey, we're close to Birmingham. I'm in Mobile, or I'm close to Birmingham," and I was like, "Well, We can make that happen if you wanted to, but I don't want to lead it. I don't have time to lead it. I've got too many other hats that I wear during the week. So if somebody else will start it and facilitate it, then I'm there. So to say no, that's why I've been trying to start my own groups or, trying to cultivate relationships with people and say, hey, come be my writing buddy over here, because there are not, we're rural. We're in Calera, so we're in rural Alabama, and so there aren't a whole lot of people to connect with out here.
The one group that I actually started when I was in Washington, I did through Meetup, and sometimes you can find local groups of writers and readers there. I found that one was the most helpful. But a lot of that was just getting together with people, other writers and talking. It wasn't really all that structured. Just kind of a fun thing to do, but helpful.
Yeah, and see, I'm a very structured person in a lot of ways, and my writing is not one of them. So to tell me to sit down and write like a 20-minute sprint, I struggle, because if I get to a point where I'm like, ooh, I need to look up how this works, or I need to ask a question about this, or, it triggers other things in my head and I start chasing rabbits. And so I don't do well with writing and structure.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't either. Do you have a time every day that you write?
I'm going to say that I have a time of day where I write best, but I don't always have time at that time to write. I'm a very productive writer about 6 a.m. It just depends on how the morning is going, if I can actually sit down, and how many administrative tasks and household tasks I can get done before 6 a.m. Otherwise, it waits until probably around 3 or 4 in the afternoon during the week, and only on certain days, because obligations, so I don't have set times that I write, but I have times where I know I should be writing, because it'll be really good if I do it.
Yeah. I do the same. I don't have set times to write. Well, for one thing, I spend a lot of mornings editing.
Yeah.
And I have to kind of say, okay, I'm taking a break. There's no editing today. I'm going to write today. And it's kind of a little bit of the mood that I happen to be in that morning. And then it's some of my editors saying, actually demanding that I go write, because you're really grumpy when you're not writing for yourself. Go write so you get in a better mood.
We don't like you right now. Go write.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's funny. So does editing other people's work, does that ever get in the way of your own creativity?
I don't think so. Like I said, a lot of what I've edited is so different from my own that I don't really think of even similar ideas for the most part. They're just most of our other writers don't. A lot of them write fantasy, and so that's different. I actually do have a fantasy novel that I wrote years ago that probably is never going to see the light of day. I don't know. It may be someday, but not anytime soon. But so a lot of them are fantasy writers. There's a few that do thrillers and things but they're really subjects that are far away from mine, and so that I think allows me to stay to my own bit of writing.
Nice. I don't know if maybe like the technical side of it would ever like make you go into your own writing and see, for me, because I think if I was being technical and critical, try in a constructively critical way, like sitting there and going through and trying to edit somebody else's work, I don't think I could shift gears and go write my own stuff very easily. Not regularly. I think that would bother me. Like it would just get in my way.
It does for me. If I even have a plan that I'm going to edit and write for me in the same day, one is going to take place in the morning, then there's going to be quite a bit of time, and maybe in the evening, 6 or 7 at night, I'll write mine.
Yeah, you got to be a little separated from it. Okay, that makes me feel a little better. I was like, man, he's a machine. That's amazing. Okay, Jack, how can listeners connect with you and your work? Tell us about your website, your social media, and all that good stuff.
So my website is jacklafountainauthor.com. You can connect on there. The publishing website is called houseofhonor.com. And I do, on mine, I have my own blog on mine, and then I have the author's blog on the publishing website. I write occasionally for that. we try and get the other authors to carry a lot of that, but I do write for that one. And then I'm on Facebook's Jack LaFountain author. Yeah, Jack. Yeah, Jack LaFountain author. Remember exactly how it goes. And I have actually one that I started for fellow writers, and it's still somewhat. I have one that's called The Raven and Owl on Facebook. And I when I started that fantasy book that I was talking about, I blogged that a chapter a week for about 62 weeks. But I did it so that I was hoping for other writers to come on and share their stories, or share their book launches or whatever they're doing. That was kind of the idea behind it. I don't know that it's done that as much as I wanted to, although it is now that some of the writers from our publishing company then use it to post their books, and share on there. So it has become a little bit more of that.
Okay. Well, that's fantastic. And all of it will be in the show notes. And so they can just click over to either website and find you on Facebook and all of that good stuff. All right. We've had all this time for you to think about the big question. So are you ready for the big question?
I'm ready.
Okay. What is one piece of advice or encouragement you want listeners to walk away with if they hear nothing else?
And it's one hard for writers, but believe in yourself and in your story.
Ooh, yes, absolutely. If you don't believe in it, who else will?
Exactly. Yes, exactly. You've got to believe in it, and argue with your editor.
I like arguing with my editor, but she's also my sister.
I don't argue with mine much. Occasionally, it's like, yeah, but not really. Because usually from the outset, I know she's right.
Right, I know.
But I'm
me,
I'm going to defend my book anyway.
Mine tells me all the time. She's like, you really need to take words out. And I sit there and stare at her and I'm like, which words? That's what I'm paying you for. Just take them out for me because I can't part with them myself.
Yeah. And I get that with my books with my editors. Like, we need to change this. Like, what are you going to change? Why don't you just change it?
Don't make me. Yeah. That's so funny. Jack, thank you so much for being here and hanging out this afternoon. If anybody leaves without something from this conversation, then that's on them, because you shared so much great wisdom and knowledge and just resources for people to plug into or to go find on their own. And so I'm just very grateful that you took the time to share with us.
Oh, well, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Like I said, I love talking books and writing.
Me too.